Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Blake Neely, the veteran musical composer and conductor who crafted the score for the nine-part Apple TV Plus World War II historical epic Masters of the Air. Masters tells the harrowing story of the 100th Bomb Group, the famed Bloody Hundredth during the war. Blake, congratulations first off on your Emmy nomination for original main title theme music.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Ray.
Oh, sure thing, Blake. Well earned. This is now actually your third war-themed project, working with Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, and Gary Getzman and Playtone. I guess first on Band of Brothers, then The Pacific, now Masters. How did you originally get hooked up with what became a wartime trilogy?
So Michael Kamen was my mentor, and he discovered me, and I came to work for him as an assistant. And by the time he was doing Band of Brothers, I was orchestrating for him. So I was one of his orchestrators on Band of Brothers. I didn't meet Playtone at the time, but when the first Playtone project came around that they were interviewing me for, there was a lot of talk about, oh my God, you were there on Band of Brothers, amazing. So then I really wanted to rally to do the Pacific, which they brought me in with Hans Zimmer and Jeff Sinelli to do, and we had an amazing time doing that. And then once that was, of course, 15 years ago, I think, like a long time ago.
How is
And then
that possible?
I know it was 2009. I remember my first spotting session on 2000 on the Pacific was the night Obama won, because I'm driving back from a spying session here and seeing the billboards that he's won. So I remember clearly what year that was. And then we fast forward and I hear that they're doing Masters, and I really just, I'd been in business with Playtone for 19 years, and I said to Gary Getzman, I really would like to do this by myself. I can do it, and I can be the through line. A person that's been connected through all of them, like yourself. Um, and he took the shot, and we did it, and we had a great time. Not always fun, because it's a harrowing tale, and it's, we all said after that 2 years, it's we need therapy, but it's good to work with family on something that is that emotional.
No, absolutely. And it was 2 years all the way through. You started,
Well, I think Steven and Tom and Gary were on it for like 8 to 10 years, but I
right.
remember he was shooting for about a year, and we were in post for a year and a half, and yeah, it's been a ride.
What sort of orchestration and tone were you going for in Masters, Blake, that maybe was different from the previous projects? I mean, is there a different way to orchestrate music for war that's set on land or sea or air? I mean, is it?
Well, I mean, I guess there is. I don't know about the land, sea, air thing, but it's interesting you say that, because I wanted it to have the same dignity and honor that my main title for the Pacific did. Um, but there was such an element of adventure, and not just heroism, but adventure, and this, no pun intended, the sense of soaring and flying that I wanted to get into it. So it starts out regal, and then there's this thing that I worked probably the hardest on in the main title, that's sort of like a launch, and then we're flying. So I really wanted to pull that off, um, and uh, and set it apart from the other two, but in the same family. There's no use of any music, any instruments pre 1945. There's no electronics. There's none of that. Um, it's in the same family. And some people
I,
have said they hear a tie back to Michael's Band of Brothers, and they hear a tie to my Pacific, and like, that's fantastic. I would hate for it
yeah,
to not tie back.
yeah, that's the whole idea, is some kind of tie. But I heard that you had found the Pacific. I'd read, I think, that you found it a tad too somber, and you were kind of determined to liven things up for Masters a little bit.
Yeah, I would, if to use musical terms, I would describe the Pacific theme as more of an elegy, and this is more of a celebration. Masters is more of a celebration.
How many episodes of Masters, Blake, did you watch before you started in producing the score? I mean, do you generally need to view the whole thing for inspiration
I
before you
I I
completely
had gotten
dive
to
in?
I had gotten to see, at the time it was 10 episodes. We made it 9. Same amount of time, but we just so we didn't have another break. I got to watch a rough cut of all of them, which was imperative because I don't think I would have gotten the same out of the script or the book to need what I needed to write this, because I'm a very visceral composer. I react to visuals very quickly. So that was very helpful. The thing changed a lot, but the story was there. The fight was there. The heroism was there. The loss, everything was there. And so then I went away and just started working on that theme specifically. My main concern was tone. I learned a lot from watching Michael write on Band of Brothers, how to figure out the right tone. One of his biggest things was music can and will, if you do it wrong, glorify war, and we don't want to do that. And so that kind of walked the line. But look, I'm not by myself. I'm collaborating. This is the best part. I'm, collaborating with Playtone and Amblin, and they're telling me, well, in this scene we need this, and there would be talks like, hey, what are they thinking? All I can see is their eyes in their, it's loud up there. And they're like, go with tragedy. Okay, let's go with that. So thankfully, a composer is not just sitting in a dark room, throwing music and saying, does it work? Does it work?
But you're right. The glorification can happen really easily.
Super easy. You can
And
really tip the line.
but you have to make it kind of sweeping and heroic at the same. So I mean, it's such a fine line. You want to honor these people, and by honoring them, sometimes it does sound glorified.
There's a really, really tough scene that I did in episode 9 when when Rosie finds the concentration camp and the bodies. And my whole thing was, this is one of those moments where if it's too much, or if it's not enough. And so really, you need music in a scene like that, but you just have to work really hard to stay way back in the background and just support, support, support. But like I said, thankfully, I'm not the last decision.
Right. But you still were more of a solo act this time than you were on the first 2.
Sure was. Um,
and that had to be really kind of freeing.
It was great. It was really free. It was, the ideas. I mean, I have great score producers around me, and players. The players were insane on this one. I challenged them with things that, it's like, hey, you can take as many takes as you want. I know this isn't easy. There's a scene where I had to ask the basses in the orchestra to hold the same note for 5 minutes without flinching, just to create this tension. And I said, at least I put it on the E string, because you don't have to finger that when you can just hold it. But it's stuff like that. If you can surround yourself with just the best in the business to help you pull off a, sometimes crazy vision, it's fantastic. And the pressure is real. These are real men. I wasn't scoring the Flash, which I do my best and care as much as I can, but these are real guys. And so the burden of representing them correctly, we all felt, everybody, even the sound team.
Well, it's almost in some ways like you're doing a documentary. I mean, because it is
Absolutely
some version of real. It is real people that are up.
Well, what's crazy is I got to, right after we finished Masters, they asked me to score the documentary piece that goes with it called The Bloody 100th.
Mm-hmm.
And I had known this whole story is real. I'd been told throughout production, none of this is made up. And then I started scoring the documentary, and it's just, oh yeah, I remember scoring this scene in the 9-parter. And it really solidifies that, wow, everything you see has really happened.
Well, you do a great job on this, Blake. I mean, the suspense and action, musical textures you craft here are really rich and sweeping, and at the same, kind of heroic and reflective. And the main title conveys, exhilaration and sort of a potential horror, putting your life on the line up in the air. I mean, listening to that opening title, it made me want to jump in a fighter jet myself and start pummeling the enemy. So, I mean, it really had the desired effect.
That's great. That's great.
What were
the
you
same
going?
thing as Nate Mann when I met Nate Mann, who plays Rosie. And another thing that's been great about this series is we were all on it so long that all gotten to know each other. Like even the cast, we've hung out, and it's funny. He said the same thing. It makes him want to jump in and help out.
Oh,
And
completely. What were you going for in that title in particular? I mean, was there any struggle for you in finding the perfect melody, as it were?
it was a struggle. I was going for once I started figuring out the theme that I wanted to write, I challenged myself to put in things that alluded to flying. Like there's big dives and big leaps in the melody, and then there's all the stuff takes off and sort of goes around as if a dogfight. But then it all has to be grounded in a hopefully memorable theme that is honoring the guys that we're honoring.
Do you ever
I mean, it's a choice. Like, do we do a major key? Do we do a minor key? Like, what feels better? What feels worse? What feels cheesy? What feels, and all these talks go back and forth in right here in this studio with my collaborators.
do you ever just sit around for weeks with the composer version of writer's block where you've got nothing and you kind of start panicking a little bit? And if so, how do you overcome
Well, you just described this morning for me. Thanks.
that? Sorry.
If you're on a deadline, it's a panic. I had 3 weeks, no, 4 weeks of writer's block on the main title theme. And then I just, writer's block is from panic, I've realized, from talking to so many writers and composers. And as soon as I relaxed, I was sitting at my piano one night at my house, not even intending to be working on this. And that's when I found it and went, oh my God, that's it. That's the master's theme. So I got my iPhone and voice memos app out, quickly recorded it, and then we had something to start with. So yes, I try to avoid writer's block with trying to recognize that it's panic and to stop panicking, go do something else, and come back.
And it's when you're not thinking about it that it suddenly pops into your head.
You know precisely. And anybody that tells you that's a serious writer of any sort that says they don't get writer's block is lying.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. No. I mean, and I always imagined the same thing was true of music. I mean, how did the recording of the actual main title work? Where did you do it? How many? It sounded like you had like 150 musicians on this thing.
You've got very good ears. We recorded in layers. We recorded in Nashville. Have great players there. The studio isn't quite big enough to house the number of musicians we wanted. So we did it in layers. And like this day we do the strings, this day we do the brass, then the woodwinds, and then come back and do the layers for the bodies that weren't in the room. So it ended up being it is probably a sound of about 100 something. At some point in music you get to where it's not even adding anything to add more bodies. There's the famous Mahler Symphony of 1,000, and it's been performed since with 100. At some point, it's like, yeah, 1,000 tracks, they're all going to start compressing into one. But we did need the force because there's so many layers to that main title. So it's fun. It's like just keeping track. It's kind of how they shoot a scene, right? It's like we're going to do this side today. We got to remember how that was so we can do that side tomorrow. Music's a little easier because you can hear what you did yesterday.
I would imagine, I mean, hearing that, yeah, it doesn't matter how many people you add, sometimes it's going to sound the same. I would compare that to aged cheddar cheese, which is a very strange thing to say, but
I want to hear the analogy.
once you get to 12-year, going to 15-year, it doesn't actually get any better or any different. 12 is pretty much the high. You're not going to get any. It's not going to get any richer or sharper after that. Same idea with music, I'm sure.
Yeah.
um,
although the question for music is, can you even last 12 years?
Yeah,
some music can't. Some of it can.
Well, mind you, but now your career has now been over 20 years.
Yeah.
And you really started doing this game right around the time of Band of Brothers, right?
Exactly. It was the very next year that I got Everwood.
And this is now your 7th Emmy nomination, and you won in the category in 2021 for the flight attendant.
Yeah.
And your marching orders were clearly quite a bit different for flight attendant than for masters, I imagine.
Clearly, I had no idea. I did flight attendant, and just my rules were it had to be all percussion, and I had to write in a style that I was very uncomfortable and never done before. To think that this was the very next project was is kind of crazy because they have nothing to do with each other. Um, except for as my son reminded me, well, they're both about flying.
I was that leads exactly into what my next question was, Blake. I'm noticing you have a thing for flight projects. You worked on Pan Am, the series Pan
Yeah.
Am, Supergirl, who flies,
Yep.
um, the flight attendant, and then now Masters. Is that
I know.
coincidental, or are you kind of an aviation?
I am not I am not scared of flying, but I will never parachute. And on the one hand, it's like stop doing flying projects, but on the other hand, they've been really successful for me and I enjoy it. And as long as I can keep doing them in a different way, I'll take on all the flying stuff. It's fine.
And the war movie scores too.
Yeah,
What
we did Greyhound for Playtone. That was a not documentary, but it was, another way of doing war.
besides the ones you've worked on, Blake? What are some of your own favorite war movie scores that you find powerful and or maybe in helped inspire you on Masters?
Oh, my gosh, that has to go first to Saving Private Ryan. Um, I would say it goes second to 1917, and third in my favorites is All Quiet on the Western Front, the most recent, like the 2021.
Those are all fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, they're amazing scores, and all three of them have completely different approaches. One is wholly orchestral with choir, one is very electronic, and one is a blend of, what Thomas Newman did of 1917, and that very first note you hear is anachronistic to what we're seeing on the screen, just instantly made you go, I got to watch this. Combine that with the one shot of the whole thing. So I'm a huge fan of movie scores, and when they're done in a way that I wasn't expecting, I'm there.
The first score that I ever really remember is, when I was young, taking in and thinking, wow, this putting the music down has really changed the way I'm viewing this movie. Was
Mm-hmm.
Little Big Man.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
I don't know if you ever saw Little Big Man, back in I don't know, 71, 72, I think it was 71 or 72. Amazing film, about the Native American experience in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it ain't a war movie if you don't have a great score. Music is so much of what we remember from the experience, and you can so change a scene. What you do, Blake, you can change the way we view things so much with it. The music is just so intrinsic to the viewing experience.
Well, I appreciate that, but I also it makes me super careful because that is a magic trick to pull off, and if you show the wrong card, it's gonna fall apart. So, um, and I do think, I mean, there's so many films. I have the pleasure of watching this stuff without music. Some watch a superhero show sometime without music, and you go, "Oh my God, this is a completely different experience." It's like that with everything we watch, and you're exactly right. With Little Bighorn, just the wrong score, that's a whole different movie experience for you. I rewatched Groundhog Day this past weekend. I mean, I've seen it 100 times, but this time I paid attention to the score. I'm like, everything George Fenton did was so perfect to what was going on, and give that to, you know, a less experienced composer. Who knows what Groundhog Day would have been?
So you're right. That I guess that does put a little more pressure on you, but you know, it's got to make you feel good too, just how important you are in this whole equation. And you know, you're not just another craftsman. You're a producer.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's like one of the best compliments I've ever heard, and it does make you feel good when it all comes together, and you're not just proud of the score. You're proud of the entire. I'm proud of Anthony Boyle's acting. I'm proud of Mark's editing. It's like it was a perfect, if I might say so. It was a perfectly executed series.
I agree with you. I think we're gonna leave things there, Blake. You can
Great.
see all 9 installments of Masters of the Air on Apple TV Plus. Blake Neely, best of luck at the Emmys in September, and thanks for joining us today at Gold Derby.
Ray, thank you so much. I'll see you again soon.